Welcome to the Kitchen Sink Podcast, where I talk about everything but. As always, I'm Ian Richings, and it's been a while. It's been a long while. At least a couple weeks. It's been a little longer than that, and I am so sorry for that. But this time I have a very legitimate reason as to why I took such a long hiatus. Because I have been working so hard and putting so much time into this very episode. So you chose a perfect time to tune in. Thank you all so much for joining me on all podcast formats, and for the first time ever, you ready for this? On YouTube. We're in a video podcast now, which is huge, something I've always wanted to do. Not sure if I'm going to stick with it, but this is a very special episode that needed very special attention because I found myself recently on a very special journey. In my mind, of course. All my journeys are in my mind. I've been thinking a lot about this pandemic and the fact that we are over a year into it now. And it's not doing my nerves any help. There's still stress going on in the world. It seems like it's just not going away. This pandemic isn't doing anyone any favors in the mental health realm. And I've been thinking, how should I cope with this stress? What's a good way to just check everything that's going on in this darn head of mine and focus? I'm just a human. I'm just a man. I'm just a college student. So I don't know anything about any of that. So I had the honor of sitting down and talking with someone who does know a thing or two about it. I had the honor of sitting and discussing all of this with Stephanie Baker of Life and Abundance Counseling Ministries. It was so fun talking to her. She is such a joy. I could have talked with her for hours, but that's a lot of editing. I don't want to waste any more time. This conversation was incredible, very enlightening. It really spoke to me and spoke to my heart and calmed my nerves. And if it helped me, I know for a fact that it's going to help all of you. So without further ado, I bring to you my exclusive conversation that I had with Stephanie Baker. I am here with Stephanie Baker. She is the founder of Life and Abundance Counseling Ministries. She is a clinical pastoral counselor, certified temperament counselor, and professional coach, and co-author of Organizing from the Heart, Change Your Mindset, Conquer Your Challenges, just to name a few of the accomplishments and little labels that she's able to have. Stephanie, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the podcast. I'm honored.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've been, as you know, we've been in this pandemic for over a year now, which is crazy. And it's safe to say that the most people going through it thought that we'd be done by now. I know that I sure did. I thought, oh, this is just going to be a fleeting thing. We'll go through it for a few months and we'll be done. But over a year in and we're still going through it. So how can people manage this stress of, oh my gosh, we're still in this? How is it ever going to end?
That's a really, really good question. And the answer for that is also different depending on whether we're talking about kids or whether we're talking about adults. I think part of what we have to realize is that there are two circles. There's a circle of concern and a circle of influence. And so I can control the things that are within my influence, or I can have influence over those things, not all of which concern me. And I can be concerned about things that I don't have any influence over. So I spend my time, I want to spend my mental energy on the things that I can control. And some of that would be, the easy thing to say would be my attitude, but it's not so easy to do, right? What am I thinking? I work a lot with clients on what are your thoughts? Like, what are you telling yourself? Because the more I tell myself, this is stressful, this is stressful, this is stressful, the more my body reacts to that. And I begin to sort of go into a spiral, if you will. I can even throw myself into a panic attack. And so we talk about, what are we thinking? What are we telling ourselves? And so we want to tell ourselves the truth. All right, this is not fun, but there are things that are going well. So we could start with, in our thinking, although this may not be the most ideal situation, whatever that situation is, maybe I haven't been able to see a loved one or fly or travel, and that's been stressful to me. Okay, what I can say is, what do I have control over? I can call that person, hopefully, right? Um, I can still write to that person. There's something ancient that a lot of us used to do, and that's called mailing letters, snail mail. So there's always that. I can send a card to someone, let them know I'm thinking of them. Not everybody has access to a cell phone. Depending on their age or where they are. If they're in a nursing home or facility such as that, they may not be able to operate that kind of stuff. But I can certainly think about things that I can do when I'm not feeling my best emotionally, when I'm feeling stressed out. I have a choice. I can get up and go do something. I work with clients and we talk about the green zone, the yellow zone, and the red zone. And so the green zone is all the stuff that we do that we know that works, that keeps us healthy. That would be going to counseling appointments if you're in counseling. It would be, keeping your doctor's appointments for your physicals, your checkups. If you're involved in a support group, it would be going to the support group. It might be going to your Bible study. It might be having coffee with friends once a week, being intentional about those types of things. I want to focus on what I know works for me, even though some of those things may have changed with the regulations, that have been around for a year. But the biggest thing to realize is that I'm responsible for my choices, right? So I get to decide, what am I going to do with that stress? There are grounding things that I talk about with clients. A lot of times when we're feeling that stress, we can use our five senses to take us out of even starting to feel an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And so our senses are the sense of taste and smell and sight and hearing. And you would be absolutely amazed at how well that works. When I'm starting to feel overwhelmed or stressed out by something, I can sit and just concentrate. Okay, what is it that I hear? And at first, what you might hear is your heartbeat in your ears if you're really stressed out. But the more you sit there, the more you can take in. All right, what do I smell? What can I see? I actually used this with a client. It was a very serious domestic abuse situation. It went to court. And so we walked in, and my client saw the person who had tried to harm her for the very first time since the attack. And she began to go right into a panic attack. And so we were ushered into a conference room, and I worked with her on that grounding exercise, and she came right out of it. Like it settles down the amygdala, which is the seat of your stress response. So when we start to feel that stress, what's happening is our brain is perceiving, oh my gosh, we're in danger, we're in peril. And so we have to engage a different part of our brain. And in order to do that, when we use our five senses, it helps us to do that, and it'll bring us out of that. The other thing I've told clients is go outside, especially now that the weather is not so cold. Go outside, take your shoes off, look before you step in the grass, but step in the grass on the ground and just stay there. Just stand there, close your eyes, do the five senses thing. But there's something about when our bare feet touch ground. I'm not talking about stepping on concrete. I mean in the grass, in the dirt. Put your feet in it and just stay there for 5-10 minutes, and you will begin to feel differently. I think it's about intentionality too. So I don't know if I've sort of overwhelmed you with those answers, but I mean, I know we covered a lot of ground there very quickly.
No, it's all great stuff. And I've never thought of focusing so much on the here and now, and not just the moment you're in, but everything about it, involving like senses and going outside and what you're around, and just absorbing what is happening around you in the current moment, as opposed to all of the things that are constantly going on in our heads. And one thing that you mentioned earlier is attitude. And that's something that I've heard. It's gonna sound silly when I say that's attitude is something that me and my wife have been talking about a lot lately, but not for the reason you think. But but we've discussed how with everything that's going on and how stressful everything is, this pandemic still going on, how attitude is one of the biggest things that we have to deal with. And in the end, everything is attitude. How we react to things, how this happens and how that happens, is all about the attitude that we have when they happen. And our attitude in turn will affect our reaction will affect whether those things really are as bad or as good as we think they are, all depending on how we perceive them and react to them. So, all of that being said, with attitude and how a lot of people are going through different things and different levels of stress with everything that's been going on because of this pandemic, including some people are working a lot more because of it. Some people aren't working enough. And a lot of that can boil over and kind of flow into home life and when you're out of work and they start kind of colliding. So, what do you think are good ways to keep emotions and attitudes at bay and kind of in check when you're in such a stressful environment? What's a good way to keep those kind of together to where it doesn't affect home as much?
I think no matter what I answer with this, it's still going to be impactful at home, and nobody's going to do this perfectly. So to expect that you're going to get to a place where there's just no conflict when everybody's on top of each other basically for 8 hours a day, and I'm kind of smiling because I just worked with a couple yesterday actually, and part of what has gone on for them is they're together all the time. I mean, all the time. He works upstairs, she's downstairs, they've got 3 kids. And so this has been, they're learning a different slow dance, let's put it that way. And they're not going to do it
Right.
perfectly, but some of the stuff they were talking about was really, it was challenging. But I think understanding, nobody's going to do it perfectly. You're not going to do it perfectly. Your spouse isn't going to do it perfectly. Your kids surely are not going to do it perfectly, right? But realizing that everybody needs their space, being intentional rather about giving one another space and grace. I'm going to need a t-shirt that 2020 has taught us space and grace, what we need for
Amen to
that.
that.
Yeah, but realizing also, God tells us a soft word turns away wrath, right? And understanding our response, the way that we choose to respond, it really is our choice. Now, most people don't feel like it's a choice because emotions happen so very quickly. We can be triggered by things and it's nanoseconds, like that it all transpires. And before we know it, we've actually spoken something in that emotion. So taking time, if you can sort of press pause on the emotion, maybe having to walk into a different room, and just ask yourself, all right, what's going on here in me? Why is there such a reaction that I'm having? Because sometimes, Ian, I mean, the reactions that we have, like, they don't match the crime. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
they're like it's much more when we're all on top of each other all the time, and there's too much togetherness. That kind of environment breeds a quick response, and so we need a little time to go, okay, what's really going on here that I'm having this strong of a reaction? And then to realize that emotions pass. Moods, not so much, but emotions, they're quicker. And so telling yourself, all right, this is just an emotion. This is not the state that I live in. What's going on? And what am I telling myself in this moment? And generally, what we're telling ourselves in that moment, things like he doesn't respect me, she doesn't respect me, right? When we're telling ourselves those things, in many cases, there is a level of untruth in what we're doing because we're usually overgeneralizing. You never do this or you always do that. Sound familiar? You're married, right? So yeah. So those are the kinds of absolutes that come in our homes sometimes. And so just realizing, okay, wait a minute. Even though this is going on or this is happening in our communication, it doesn't always go like this. I may feel like that's, but if I tell myself it always happens, then there's no room for any solution. Because quite honestly, the feeling we experience first, or that's what we think we experience first, rather, but it's really a thought that happens that generates the feeling. And so if you can identify the thought that is sort of exacerbating the feeling, then you've got a place to work with it. And then just giving each person the chance to express their point of view. When I work with couples, marriage counseling, one of the hardest things is for them to let the other one talk. It's very hard. And so an exercise that I do with them is typically to say, all right, so Ian, what did you just hear your wife say to you? And inevitably, not you, Ian, never you, but some husbands or some wives would say, if there were 5 points that the spouse made, they would remember 3 and skip over 2 that were made because they were
Mm,
hearing what they thought they were going to hear. not what was actually said. And there's a difference between hearing and listening, right? Like I can hear you talk, but am I listening? Am I really concentrating? And then there's the old thing of what wasn't said, but what was implied, right? So you're never home enough means I really miss you, right? And
Right.
and I feel alone. But what do people hear? What you're not doing right. You're never home, or that kind of thing. So the communication piece, this is a chance whenever we have challenges. I believe God is giving us a lab to work in, um, real world, real time, real world. And family is one of the biggest labs I think God ever assigned us, to be
Oh
quite
yeah.
frank. So we get to practice. There's a scripture in Colossians. I believe it's chapter 3, verses 12 through about 15, and it's talking to us about how we're to clothe ourselves, what we're to put on. We're to put on compassion and kindness and humility and patience, and just even those, and there's more that's listed there, but even those, it's inferring how I would act. And so how do we act with each other when we're stressed out? Something I didn't mention earlier that I would love to say right now too is there's a theme of intentionality that we've talked about with our thinking, with pressing pause on strong emotions to kind of take a moment and get ourselves out of the emotional brain into the rational brain. But then there's also intentionality about what we're putting in our minds and our ears. There's a lot of stuff out there right now that creates anxiety if you allow it to. Um, News feeds, social media. I've pulled way back, even personally, on the amount of time that I spend on social media. I wasn't on it a ton to begin with, but I've really pulled back, because I don't want my mind like just flooded with that. I don't want to keep that amygdala, that stress response lit up. I can't work if I do that. And the
Yeah.
reality is, most people will become sick if they continue to do
Mhm.
that. And we are seeing a rise even in our practice right now. And it might surprise you to know that it's with kids more so than adults.
Hmm.
Um, and so the intentionality is really important for parents to monitor. How much time is my child spending on social media, and how much time is my child spending, watching TV, and what are they watching?
Yeah.
We see kids at a much younger age now having anxiety attacks and having panic attacks, that kind of stuff. So that intentionality is really important.
Limiting screen time is such a huge thing, like especially for adults. Just a few months ago, I ended up I was realizing that social media was really taking over. This is coming from someone who loves social media, but I'm on basically every social media platform you can imagine, and I love it. But it was just taking up so much of my time that I took a month-long hiatus off of it,
Yeah.
and it felt great. And again, I love social media. I love posting about my life. I love posting things that'll make people laugh. And social media is kind of an outlet for me to get my thoughts out and to just give people some sense of enjoyment. But even for me, taking a month off of social media was crazy for my productivity, and I could just feel like I wasn't as worried as often. And so for adults especially, I can see that just unplugging from social media can mean a world of difference, especially nowadays.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously there's a business case to be made for social media. My ministry uses it for that, for community awareness and that kind of stuff. But from the personal aspect, like I love that you took a month off. Kind of like, what would we call that? A sacrifice of intentionality, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Sacrifice of being present. And I think, the Lord calls us to be present, right? He says, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough trouble of it, or today has enough trouble of its own, right? Why worry about that when none of us can add another day to our lives,
That's one of
basically?
my favorite verses because I've had to take it to heart on a daily basis.
I think we would all be wise to do that. In the parable of the sower, Jesus talks about how the good seed doesn't go deep because the person that he's talking about is consumed, it's choked out by the worries of this life, and wealth, or whatever the rest of that is. But what jumped out to me is the worries of this life, right? It's choked out. So I believe that God gives us the peace that we need moment by moment. And we have to be intentional about that. Jesus says, take every thought captive, or scripture says, take every thought captive, making it obedient to Christ. And that's also part of what we've been talking about, right? Being able to respond in a certain way, realizing that we have that choice. We're not just victims of our emotions. We don't have to be victims of our thinking. We can do things differently, and we can handle this. The other part is understanding that when we face challenges like what we have faced in this last, how many bazillion, 11 million months that this has gone on, what is God doing in your life? Like, what has he wanted? What does he want to show you about you? And the other part, what have you learned about you? What have you learned that you can do without? What have you learned that you do really, really well? And what have you learned that you need to work on, or that you want to work on? Not need to, but want to. Wherever there's challenge, there's an opportunity for growth. And remembering that is one of the things that I think helps us be intentional about all the other things we were talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Man, I don't know how what more you can say. It's incredible. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for being on this podcast and giving such great insight on how to take care of this stress that's still taking a hold of us for over a year now. I definitely learned something. It was an awesome discussion. Just thank you so much for your time, and I really hope to talk to you again.
Thank you. I look forward to it. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
What an incredible discussion. Thank you so much again to Stephanie Baker for all of her time and all of her incredible insight on everything regarding stress in this pandemic time. I was so excited to talk to her, and she delivered just like I knew she would. You can find her and everything about Life in Abundance Counseling Ministries at lifeinabundance.com or on their Facebook page. You can follow me on Instagram at Ian_1 and only, and find every episode of this podcast on anchor.fm/Ian-Richings. Again, thank you all so much for listening. This was such a fun episode. So very special. Just like every single one of you. Stay awesome, stay cool, stay healthy, stay happy. And I hope to see you all on the next podcast.